Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of domestic violence, sexual assault, substance abuse, self-harm and suicidal ideation, emotional abuse, parental conflict, violence, medical trauma, and legal issues. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back to Radiant Resilience. I am here today with my very special younger sister. I'm not sure what order these episodes are going to end up airing in, but you may or may not have already heard from our middle sister. But now I have my little baby sister with me. Her name is Terrah, and she will be 24 in May. So there's actually a pretty big age gap between the two of us, which has been interesting through our lives, I think. Sometimes I feel like a little bit more of a mother figure than a sister figure. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. Anyways, she is an admin for a dental office in Castle Rock, Colorado, which is where we grew up. And she's currently engaged and getting married this August. Ooh, I almost said April. Those A months I always mix up. So currently in the throes of wedding planning. And yeah, so she has some interesting stories to tell about being the baby of the family. It was a little bit rough at times.
Yeah, I would say so.
So we're going to go there today. Do you want to start you mentioned before we started that it all started in your early teen years. So why don't you start there and start telling us your story, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like for me, everything started going personally downhill when I was in middle school. I would say generally in elementary school, in the beginning of middle school, I was considered a part of the popular group.
Okay.
But I pretty quickly in 8th grade started realizing that those people that were in my life that I considered friends would stab me in the back as quickly as they could, which was really confusing for me. And I think a lot of the things that we went through as younger kids played a part into that. But to feel betrayed by people that I had been friends with for so many years was definitely super strange. So I think...
Really quick. So when you talk about what we went through as kids, you're probably mostly referring to the divorce, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And like you said earlier with the age gap too, I think it was hard for me growing up and not necessarily being as close in age to you guys.
Yeah.
Because I felt like everything that I went through in middle school and stuff like that, I didn't necessarily know how to come to you guys because you were so much older.
For sure. There's a part of me that wants to do an episode on our divorced family and how that affected us, because I think it's so interesting. We were all three at such different stages of life and ages that it affected us all differently in that regard. I had mom and dad together my entire childhood. And then you were, what, 7, I think, when they got divorced. And so of course you're going to process that completely differently than Tegan and I. So
yeah,
continue then. I'm sorry. No, so your friends were stabbing you in the back.
Yeah, and I had started making friends that were not typically in the friend group that I normally would make, that being the popular friend group.
Okay.
So I had made a friend, her name was Selena, and I was so intrigued by her. She had, keep in mind, we're in 8th grade. So yes. We're what, 13, 14?
Yeah, I think so.
And she had gauges, and her nose was pierced, and her tongue was pierced, and her lip was pierced. And to me, I felt like a lot of people our age were scared by her.
Just because of her appearance. Intimidated?
Intimidated, yeah. And because it wasn't normally what in eighth grade, I was so intrigued. And I thought that it was so cool that she just did whatever she wanted to do and she didn't care what anybody thought. And people didn't walk all over her.
Mm.
And people were walking all over me. And so I had befriended her. And I started to share things with her of what was going on with my friends at the time. And of course, I would never put up with that. There's no way I would ever have a friend like that, which obviously, looking back, there was no reason for me to continue putting up with that. But I think I went from one end of the spectrum of standing up for myself, but also choosing right for myself. And standing up for myself, but choosing a path that wasn't great, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I wanted that. People are intrigued by me, but almost too scared to tell me what they think about.
Interesting place to want to be, which I suppose, again, we're talking like teenage minds, but you wanted people to be intimidated by you.
Yeah,
That's
I would
okay.
say so, yeah. And I don't necessarily think I would have chosen that for myself, but to see the way that my friend had carried herself through that, it was intriguing.
Okay.
But from then on, I would drink in school with her in middle school. I started smoking cigarettes when I was 14 years old. That's still, I vape now, but all of those things are choices that still follow me to today, most of them. When I went to high school, one of the things I always struggled with was boys.
Oh, girlfriend. Who didn't struggle with boys to some degree, but continue.
Which was one of the big things that played a part into me switching friend groups. When I was in middle school, I was talking to, I would say, probably the first boyfriend that I had that I actually was heartbroken over. And my friend at the time had started talking to him. And they were talking behind my back. He broke up with me. Long story short, I get to high school. Selena and all of the group of friends that I had at that time, they called them the alley rats at BC.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that.
I don't think, obviously, I know some of this stuff, but I may not know the small details because I was half out of the house at that point in time. So, okay, so the alley rats.
Essentially, and I guess I could say I was considered, I don't want to say just them, I was a part of it too, but there was a portion off of campus where we could all go smoke our cigarettes and do the things we weren't supposed to be doing.
I feel like that was the case when I was in school too. I never did any of that stuff, but I feel like there were lots of kids that were sneaking off campus and doing that stuff.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, so we had this like one spot that we would go, and keep in mind, I was so excited. I don't know if you remember. I went to a football game in 8th grade when I was still trying to hold on to all my popular friends. And I saw the cheerleaders and I reached out to you and I was like, I want to cheer so bad in high school, but I wanted to be on varsity. And I didn't ever have any experience with gymnastics or anything like that.
And I don't remember, was it still the same coach that I had? I think it was.
Yes, it was.
I remember her, even when I was there, she was upping the bar significantly with the gymnastics in order to make varsity. And I almost didn't make varsity my senior year because of it.
Yeah, and I didn't really work with her so much because I had zero skills.
So you were on like the freshman team or JV?
Freshman.
Okay. Yeah, I was on the freshman team my freshman year too.
So yeah, I was on the freshman team and I never really got my skills up or anything, but keep in mind, they're so strict when you're on cheer and stuff like that. They watch you. You're not allowed to go off campus and do the things.
And you have to have good grades and things like that. Yeah.
So I definitely was cautious, I would say, my freshman year to a certain degree, just for the cheer factor of things. But definitely getting into a lot of trouble, lots of boy drama. Honestly, majority of that turns into a blur for me. I did get suspended though, my freshman year. We all went down to smoke weed. We had an interesting thing called AA.
Okay.
It was academic assistance.
Oh, okay. So not Alcoholics Anonymous.
No, but they offered it, I want to say it was every day before school started.
Okay.
So it was like an hour or like 45 minutes before school started. You got a chance to go visit any teachers to make up work or extra credit, things of that nature. So I think I convinced mom to drop me off for AA, but I didn't actually need to go to any of my
no.
classes. And we went to the little tunnels and
Little tunnel.
yeah, there was a whole bunch of us, and we ended up smoking. And one of the guys that we were with at the very end, we were walking back to school, and he's panicking. And we're like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? No, my heart is racing.
Oh,
I'm
no.
not feeling right. And at first, we're all in high school, so we're laughing at him. We're like, oh, you're fine. You just can't handle yourself. I go to class and I end up finding out that he went into cardiac arrest.
Oh my gosh.
So what happened is we all collectively shared one bowl,
Okay.
but the girl that we were using the pipe from
Mm-hmm.
had been smoking oxy out of the same pipe, and I and several of us others had gotten the top of the bowl. So like we didn't get the bottom. So
Oh
we
my
weren't
God, I don't think I
experiencing at
ever
all.
knew this.
Yeah, we weren't experiencing at all what he was experiencing.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he smoked all the oxy that was at the bottom of the bowl.
Oh my
And
God.
he went into cardiac arrest. And obviously he had to say what happened. So we all got in trouble.
So, but he lived. He was okay.
Yeah, he was
Okay,
totally
that's
fine.
good.
Still alive today. So yeah, but that was definitely a bad experience. I remember everyone was in communication before we all got pulled. Like we all knew we were in trouble.
Mm.
And then when they pulled us, luckily it was my first offense. So I think they had a 2 strike.
Mhm.
So one
This-
more and you're done.
This was your freshman year?
Mhm.
For some reason, I thought this was so much later in your high school years. I don't know why, but I don't know. Okay. Apparently, it's a bit of a blur for me as well.
That's okay.
So,
I don't know that we've ever really talked too much details about this.
no, I mean, I was around when it was happening, and I think I talked to mom about it and stuff, but like, I don't think you and I have ever had an in-depth conversation about it. So, I'm sorry. Continue.
No, no worries. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely super scary. So they suspended me. And after that, I want to say I moved in with dad.
Mhm.
And I was supposed to be doing homeschooling after that.
Oh, like online.
Mhm.
Okay, I do vaguely remember that.
I got suspended. It was like middle of my freshman year.
Okay.
So I tried to finish my freshman year at dad's house online, and it didn't go well at all. I could not function in that way. That's not how I learn. And unfortunately, for I'm sure a lot of other people as well, I didn't know that until I tried it.
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Then dad ended up having a conversation with me, and he was like, hey, I really feel like you should go back. Like, you're so young. It's just your sophomore year. Like, you made a mistake. Go back. So I was super excited to go back. Ended up going back my sophomore year, and then I didn't last long. I ended up getting in trouble for pretty much the same thing. It was weed, not oxy, so I shouldn't say the same thing. But I had a very strict set of rules from administration because of the trouble I had been in before. And they were like, you cannot have any more slip-ups or you will be gone. And I felt like in the beginning they were on my side. Not to say that they weren't in the end, but I don't know. We'll get there.
Yeah.
So I went off of campus with a girl that I was close with, and she wasn't allowed off campus, and I didn't know that. They saw both of us go off campus in the cameras. She got caught when she went back. She had the pipe, I had the weed, and she ended up ratting on me. So they pulled me into school. I knew about it before I went into the office.
I feel like it's probably the case for most people that are getting in trouble. They're like, oh shit.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, and I had people messaging me, hey, your friend just got pulled from this class and she's pretty sure she's got caught for the weed that you guys smoked. So just a heads up. So it was things like that where I was like, yeah, I'm in trouble. So I went back to school, and the first class that I entered, there was a security guard waiting for me. Luckily, I had dumped the weed. That was like one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life. And as an adult, I would deal with it so differently now. But as a child, I didn't have any idea. And sure, I was in the wrong, and I definitely did things I wasn't supposed to be doing. But they pulled me pretty early in the day. It was, I think, at my lunchtime or like right after my lunchtime. They refused to let me call mom or dad. They were threatening to call the police on me, and I didn't have anything on me. So it literally took them scaring me into fessing up.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I was hysterical. And they took me out because I said I threw the weed out into a field, which was a lie. But they took me out with a security guard into a field that I knew the weed wasn't in. And she screamed at me for 30 minutes because it was her lunch break.
Oh.
And yeah, anyways, long story short, I ended up fessing up. What they said was because, and they told this to mom and dad as well, they were expelling me. But because I had fessed up and I had given them the information that they wanted, they were not going to criminally charge me.
Oh, that's good.
So I was all excited about that. Dad and mom were like, you're so lucky. Like, you need to be really thankful that they only expelled you. Like, that sucks, but it could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
Then I tried to do a Christian online school after that.
But you've already admitted that the online school thing didn't really work for you.
So I was iffy about that, but because it was a Christian program and I was under the understanding that I would have a little bit more assistance with the teachers, I was willing to try it. At that point, school for me was like off the table. So anyways, 6 months later, dad receives a letter in the mail with a court date. They criminally charged me.
6 months later?
Yes. So what I think happened is when I got back onto school campus, I went into the girls' bathroom and I put the weed in the tampon holder. And I think because they couldn't find it the day of, they couldn't criminally charge me. But when they went back and looked at cameras, I think they found it. So even if we went to court and were like, hey, you said you weren't criminally charging us, what's going on? They'd be like, oh, we found it. So we have proof. We have video proof of you going into the bathroom, all these things. So I think that's what ended up happening. I'm not 100% sure. But that was rough. And then I was on probation forever after that. But obviously, online school again was a complete failure. When I was living with dad, I wasn't getting along with mom before that. And I think that had a lot to do with personal things that were going on in my life. Back to Selena, I basically lived at her house in my freshman year of high school, which was not the greatest thing for me looking back in hindsight. There were a lot of questionable things going on in her household, but I think I felt accepted there. And so even though maybe I recognized those things as being inappropriate, I was willing to put up with that over not feeling accepted elsewhere, if that makes sense. And of course, I had made so many mistakes at that point that like I had no room for grace with our parents. So maybe for me, that was the only place I could get grace was someone else's family. But Selena lived next door to a guy that I ended up getting close with. I didn't know him super well, which is embarrassing to admit now. But I felt like I know he was older, and I felt like he had such a different way of carrying himself than any of the other people in my grade or any of the other people that I had met before. Kind of Selena. It was just like an intriguing person. And I ended up like losing my virginity to him, and he completely ripped my heart out. Treated me like crap. It was very obvious after. That was really the only thing that he wanted from me. I tried to have a relationship after that, and it just continued to be super hurtful towards me. So I think personally, and I've explained this to mom as well, but for me, that was so hurtful. And I didn't know how to tell my mom that I lost my virginity in the midst of all of this crap that I had gone through over the years prior. And that like I hated myself and the decisions I was making. I couldn't tell her that. And so it was easier for me to be an awful person and I guess be hurt and maybe show my hurt on the outside rather than talk about it and take it out on her and like our relationship. So I think that's ultimately what led me to living with dad.
Okay.
And he could recognize all those things. And
So this was all, that little portion there was prior to you getting kicked out of school?
yes, I got
Dating that guy?
expelled. Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I got
Okay.
expelled and all of that right after all of this happened.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we did a little backtracking there.
Yes,
So
sorry
just
about
for
that.
people who are listening so they don't get confused.
Yeah, I'm bad about that, so thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I love dad and I have a better relationship with dad now than I have ever had, but I will admit that I think at the time he thought he could handle me. And he didn't really necessarily understand what he was getting himself into.
Because dad had me as a teenager. And let's just be real. For those listening, I was the older one and the most well-behaved teenager. Don't get me wrong, I was no saint. But
You were pretty close.
I would beg to differ for the stupid things I got in trouble for. But I have since called dad out. I don't know if I've told you that, but oh yeah, I'm like, because the things he used to threaten me with, I was so afraid of him in high school that because he would threaten like at home boot camp with me if I didn't get my shit together. And I was doing things like, I don't know, I didn't have the best of grades. And maybe I would talk back. That's about it. Talk on the phone late at night with my boyfriend at the time. That's the stuff I was doing. I wasn't sneaking out. I wasn't going to parties. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't doing alcohol. And so I've since been like, if I had known, which isn't true, because let's be real, that's not my personality, but I like to give him shit for it. And I'm like, if I had known that you were so full of shit, I like to think I would have tried to have gotten away with a lot more.
Yeah, that's so funny.
And that was after, no offense to you, but watching him threaten you and you basically just be like, yeah, frickin', and then do what you're doing anyways, and him not follow through with half the stuff he said he would have done. Anyways, it's just, I've said it to his face, so I can say it on here. I've called him out on that just to give him shit because I think that they thought I was such a rough teenager.
Yeah.
And they gave me a really hard time over it for a very long time. And now I like to just be like, hey, how bad was I, Dad and Mom?
I love that. That's hilarious.
So anyways, little side tangent about me, but moving on.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, you'd moved in with Dad.
And oh, yes, the homeschooling wasn't working. He laid out this plan for me that would be like, as long as I can trust you, you can do whatever you want, which I think was lethal words for him to use with me.
Okay.
Because I think I took it the wrong way. But I ended up actually deciding to go back to school for my junior year. And I was really excited about it. I was so excited to show everyone that I could do all the things that everyone thought I couldn't do, that I could graduate high school. And so I was going to a different school. It's actually interesting because they had a wait list for that school. I don't know if you knew that.
I don't think I did know that.
They had a wait list and Mom contacted the principal and she was like, here's the situation with my daughter. Like, homeschooling's not working. If she doesn't enter this year, she's going to be super behind. We ended up having a meeting with the principal, just me, Mom, and the principal. And he sat me down and said, I believe in kids and I believe in you and the way that you talk about yourself and the way that you carry yourself. I feel like you could be really successful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump you on the list so that you can enter for your junior year. And then that way we can get you back on track for graduating on time. And before we left that meeting, he shook my hand and he said, I'm going to watch you walk across that stage and get your diploma. I just know it. And I was like, all right, here we go. Kickstart into that summer was probably one of the hardest summers of my teenage years. That was when I met River, which I knew
Forgot about that kid.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew about River, like we had been mutual friends with other people through Selena when I was younger, but I was never very interested. He gave me too much bad boy vibes when I was younger. But when I was in junior year, it was the perfect amount of bad boy vibes. So I was interested. We dated, but that kickstarted me into failing drug tests for probation because I was drinking and I was smoking. And then they put me on all sorts of hardcore structure and security with pretrial. So actually, yeah, pretrial is worse than probation, in my opinion. I had a pretrial officer that checked in with me once a day, and he could walk into my school, my job, or my home at any point to make sure I was where I was supposed to be. I wasn't allowed to do anything besides homeschool and work, but I worked at Subway.
I remember the Subway days.
Dare I name that brand? But yeah, I worked at Subway, and essentially whenever I worked at Subway, I was doing whatever I wanted. I had anyone there that I wanted. I worked late. I could do whatever I wanted. It was great. At the time, I was dating River, who he lived in Colorado Springs. We were in Castle Rock. So he would have to drive down. I was paying gas money.
His gas money?
Yes.
Oh, my Lanta.
Yeah, I was paying gas money for him to come down. He dropped out. I think he was 17 when we were dating. So he didn't do anything. He didn't have a job. He would just come to my high school on my lunch and then meet me at my job when I was off. Like straight up loser. And that's when I started running away and things like that. I think that was probably, besides when I had lost my virginity and like I didn't really know how to talk about it, that was probably one of the most lonely times I had ever felt in my entire life, because I felt so close with this guy who I think I knew deep down didn't really have my best interest at heart or didn't really care about me. I knew that it was wrong that I was in high school and paying for his gas money and he's sleeping until noon every day.
Yeah, and not having a job himself.
And he did a lot of weird psychological things to me. I remember one night he called me in the middle of the night and was like, "We need a break." And I was like, "Okay." And then the next day I went to school and all these girls were sending me videos of him taking belly shots off of this other girl I went to school with.
Oh my gosh.
And they were like seeing each other, and it was so painful for me. And I actually remember we had Thanksgiving. I was with him for, I think, only 6 months, and it was just torture the entire time. But I genuinely felt like that was where I was supposed to be. I couldn't really explain to you why. But yeah, it was one night at Subway. This was the bad night that I ran away. I ran away several times.
I do remember that.
But
I think one of the times I was out of town on a trip, and I don't know if it was Tegan or mom that texted me and was like telling me, and nobody could find you for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I think that was
this time. Okay.
Yeah. I couldn't even really tell you what my headspace was at that time. I think I was just so done with everything and so tired of being alone. And I felt like River, if I was with him in his space and surrounded with what he wanted, that was me fixing my loneliness. And I clocked out of work at Subway and I had my car and I was supposed to go back to mom's house. And this was also right after I had begged mom to move back in with her.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was driving to Colorado Springs to see River, and mom was calling me, and I rolled my window down on I-25 and threw my cell phone out
You
the
did?
window. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is all like vaguely coming back to me now.
Yeah. And I went to River's house and smoked and drank with his family, just like what I wanted. That was basically what I did with Selena all the time, was smoke and drink with her family, and that was my element. That's what I chose, was that intriguing, I'm doing what I'm not supposed to be doing life. And yeah, days went by. I ended up going to the gas station in Colorado Springs because there was a police officer that was contacting several people in River's family. And I called the police officer from the gas station and I said, "Hi, this is Terrah. I'm fine. I'm not coming home. So just tell my family I'm fine." And he was like, "Kate, that's not an option."
Because you were how old? Like 16? 17?
15.
Well, you were driving.
15.
So.
Oh, 16. Yeah, I must have been freshly 16.
But you weren't 18, which by law, you could have probably said that, but
yeah,
16. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was just like, "Sorry, is what it is. Come find me. Good luck." And he was like, "All right."
Oh man.
Then I stayed over one more night and I woke up the next day. We were sleeping on their couch, by the way. I woke up with River's mom sitting at my feet. And she was like, "Good morning." She had her coffee and everything. And I was like, "Hi, what's going on?" And she told me that the police had contacted her and said that if they showed up to residence and I was on the property, they were all being criminally charged.
Oh, wow.
And like it was a big deal. They all were gonna get in a lot of trouble. So it was like last resort, you give her up or you're in trouble type of thing.
Mm.
So I spent a couple of hours at a park in Colorado Springs, just dilly-dallying, waiting to go home. At that point, it was up. They told me I could stay, but I had to have permission, which I understood. I drove back to Castle Rock, went to the Wendy's in Castle Rock because I didn't have a cell phone. No one was home. Mom wasn't home. Landon's birthday party was that day at Dad and Net's, and I ruined that. I was supposed to help set up for that. And I called Mom from the Wendy's while she was there. I said, "Hey, can you, like, where are you?" Not realizing she was pissed. They ended up meeting me at the house, but they called the cops. And so the cops came before Mom and Jeff got there. And the cops were like asking me why I ran away, and just I didn't know how to explain any of that to them. I think at the time I tried to explain that I was feeling like feelings of like suicidal thoughts or like just being really lonely. That's why I did what I did. But they ended up taking me to the hospital because I said that. And they kept me there, I think, overnight. And then someone picked me up the next day. And yeah, I still dated River.
Oh, wow.
After that, Dad went to court with me whenever I had court shortly after that and put a no contact order. So if he ever actually was caught around me, he would have gotten in a lot of trouble. But it didn't last long. We were actually at your one of your
Many
other
houses.
Yeah. And we were there for Thanksgiving.
Oh, I remember that Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And River had been weird. He had been such a dick to me over like the last couple of weeks, and it obviously was a holiday. And I reached out to him first thing in the morning, said, "Good morning," whatever. He posted on social media, "Who's bored and wants to hang out?" Couldn't talk to me. Long story short, I broke up with him that day, which I'm really proud of myself that I was the one who broke up with him.
Oh, yeah.
Because it seemed like he was trying to do that for a lot longer than I ever did. But yeah, I think it was just like another one of those people that I had hoped would be different, or that like I felt like I had laid everything out on the line for. And it wasn't reciprocated at all, especially when we broke up. It was like, okay, I don't care. I could care less. And it's like, dude, I literally ran away from home multiple times. That was, I think, the third time I had run away from home, second or third. It was the most serious, but still. And I don't know, it was just strange to me that I put so much on the line for these people who ultimately did not care about me. And I ended up actually a mess after that. I was still working at Subway, and there was a homeless man that lived in the area. I don't know. And I would give him free subs, so he would go to the liquor store for me.
Okay.
So I'd give him cash and I would just make him free food. And he was giving me Everclear.
Oh, wow.
This was the time that we had our sister's night. And we went to Rock Yard.
I do remember that.
And you guys picked me up, and I couldn't even necessarily relay that night to you, but I know it was really bad. That was that time. I was drinking Everclear. That's why I was acting the way that I was. I brought Everclear to school.
Oh, wow.
There were multiple instances where people reported me drinking at school. I was. And I either had officers who came and smelled my breath that said it only smelled like tobacco, I think because they knew I was already in deep with the legal system, still on probation, by the way. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know that they necessarily did good by me by letting me go when they knew I had been drinking. There was one incident where I know that they knew I was drinking. But yeah, it was just really bad. And Tristan and Joe started coming to Subway. They were just like mutual friends, but several years older than me. And they would come and get free food, hang out, smoke in the back, drink, whatever. And I ended up getting really close with Tristan. And he was so sweet. Like, genuinely such a sweetheart. He was a major pothead, but who cares? There's worse things in the world, obviously. I was drinking Everclear every day, so
Yeah.
I ended up getting super close with him and Joe, and they would come to Subway, I think, every day. We started dating pretty quickly. Like, I think he started doing the same thing that River would do and come to my high school and have lunch with me. But he lived so close because he lived in those apartments down the street.
Okay.
So it was like a different story for him. But he was so protective and so intrigued with me. And honestly, the word that I really should use is obsessed.
Oh, okay.
I think I didn't recognize that in the beginning, but I think I liked it. Whether or not I was able to recognize what it was, whether it was healthy or it wasn't in the beginning.
Anytime you're getting attention, I think everybody likes to have somebody's attention. And when you have their full attention like that, especially earlier on, you're not seeing the red flags that are probably there.
Totally. And I feel like with all the other guys, I maybe had their attention slightly in the beginning, but it never lasted very long. So I personally felt like I took things pretty slow with like I was really trying to gauge if he was going to do the same shit to me that everyone else did. And at this time, I'm at the tail end of 16, almost 17.
This is a lot that happened in a short time frame.
My therapist likes to say that I've had an eventful 24 years of life.
To say the least. I'm like, wow, it was only, you're like 15, 14, 15 as a freshman. And then to think that all that happened in that freshman year, yeah, and then just barely before you turned 17. So anyways, this was a lot in a short period of time.
Yeah, it definitely was a lot. And I feel like in the beginning, everyone in our family was pretty fond of Tristan. I feel like you would be able to speak on that portion better than I would.
I don't remember having negative thoughts towards him or feelings towards him early on.
Okay.
Probably indifferent. Maybe it was just like oh, here's another one of Terrah's boyfriends. I don't know.
Well, I think he was really the only one that you guys got to meet.
Yeah, that's probably true. I feel like I met River at one point. I don't know why, but I feel like I have a visual of him for some reason. And maybe it's made up in my head just from the stories, but
there may have been a time that I was getting my hair done or something when he came in.
Okay.
Like very early stages. I know he met Dad once.
Yeah.
I don't remember if he met Mom.
Okay.
But
anyways, so we're all vaguely fond of Tristan.
Yeah, I would say so from what I remember. And I don't know, things were so good, like for so long. And I still hated where I was at. Just with living with Mom and Dad, I can honestly say, and it's not anything that I can pinpoint about either of them as people or how they are to live with. They're not awful people.
No.
I just don't, I think it's a me thing.
Okay.
I want to do what I want to do, and I want to take care of me, and I want to make my decisions.
I would say as an outsider looking in on all of that is how it appeared as well. Like you just didn't want to be told what to do, and they were trying to tell you what to do and reel you in, and you were like, no. So that is how I viewed it.
Yeah.
At the time as well.
And I felt like I was trying to do things that emotionally fulfilled me. And no, they weren't appropriate. But even to this day, I don't do necessarily with people telling me what to do. sure my fiance can attest to that.
Maybe a little bit of the BSR coming out in you.
But yeah, I don't know. I wanted to do things myself. I wanted to figure them out myself. I wanted to be responsible for myself and make my money and not rely on other people. Because it's scary to rely on other people. And so I ended up getting to a point where I knew I was dropping out of high school. And I sat down with my counselor at school. She basically said, if you want to graduate, you're going to be a super senior. And I said, nope, that's not happening. I'd rather get my GED. So I decided to drop out. I think I finished the semester and then ended up dropping out. When I dropped out, mom and dad were like, okay, dude, we're done. You can do whatever you want. I'm so tired of telling you what you can and can't do. You can move out. Do what you want. And I was like, I'll be out tomorrow. And I think for me, what I heard was you can move out tomorrow.
Okay.
I literally, so actually, I'm so sorry. I'm going to backtrack a smidge. Right before I moved out, this was ultimately what prompted them into allowing me to move out. Tristan and I were in a relationship. And we were head over heels for each other, obsessed. He decided that he was kicked out of his parents' house because he was violent all the time. He would break stuff. He would do inappropriate things. So they kicked him out. I actually was present for them kicking him out. I would go on my lunch breaks from school. I also would ditch class to go because he lived so close to my high school, to his apartment where he lived with his mom, his stepdad, and his two younger siblings. And that was when he started showing signs of violence towards me. I saw a few signs of it when we would hang out with friends. Someone would say something that irked him, and he would react in a way that was extremely unattractive to me. When dad was younger and I was younger, I remember several instances where he reacted in ways that were inappropriate due to his anger. That made me very upset when I was little. And so I felt triggered by those simple things in the beginning, and we would have conversations about that. But I remember there was one specific time that I was at his parents' house and we were going to have sex, and the comforter was down lower at the bed. And there was a glass of water on the nightstand right next to the bed. And I had pulled the comforter up, hit the glass of water, and it dumped all over us in the bed. It's just a glass of water. Obviously, it's not ideal, but you share a room with your 12-year-old brother, and there's two beds in here, and it's a tiny room with two nightstands. I didn't mean to. It was awful. He was throwing stuff at me and pushing me.
All because you spilled a glass of water.
Yeah, screaming at me, throwing me onto his little brother's bed. Keep in mind, he was over 6 feet tall. I would say he was like 6'1", 6'2". I think I was 5'5" and like 125 pounds. He could throw me around like a friggin' rag doll.
Was that the first time that he was physical with you?
I don't remember, actually.
Okay. That's just one of the first ones that sticks out in your mind.
Yeah, I think I want to say that was one of the first times that he was ever physical with me. There was another time shortly after that his siblings were home, and I can't remember what he got upset with me about. Actually, it may have been the same. No, it wasn't the same instance. They all blend a little bit at that point. But I remember there was one time where his little siblings were there and he had gotten physical with me. And he ran out into the kitchen to grab a knife because then he was suicidal because he hurt me.
Okay, so he did this whole rage thing about something stupid, and then he would pull the suicide card.
Yeah, I would be in the corner having the shit beat out of me, completely unable to take anymore, and be like, can you just leave me alone and stop touching me? And then he'd be like, oh my gosh, look at what I did to you. And it was like a whole like realization type thing of a 360 of emotions of I'm so angry at you and I hate you and I'm going to put my hands on you to like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. I hate myself. And I actually ran out into the kitchen and was like, what the hell are you doing? He showed me he had the knife. He ran back into his room. I followed him and I put my arm through the door. I think this was the first time he was ever like physical with me. I think this was prior to the time in the bed with the water. And his little sister was home and he was opening and closing and slamming the door on my arm. And I couldn't do anything about it besides say, my arm is there. My arm is there. I finally got my arm out of the way and he slammed the door shut. His little sister came out of her room hysterical and was like, my mom's on the phone. This happens all the time. And I was like, okay. And she was like, you just need to leave. You just need to leave. And I basically was like, I'm not putting up with this. I'm leaving. Goodbye. So there were definitely signs of all of that.
So then eventually you guys move in together.
So he got kicked out of his parents' house for being violent like that.
Okay.
I was there when he got kicked out. And if I'm being 1,000% honest, I don't even remember the circumstances. I want to say something happened with his car. And then he came inside, like all upset about his car and was taking it out on everyone. And his mom was like, we're not doing this anymore. He ended up finding a really crappy, I call it the dungeon in Castle Rock.
Yeah. I never actually saw the place, but I heard about it.
Yeah, it was rough. It was literally a poorly constructed side door to this little woman's basement. And yeah.
So you guys move in there together because
he moved in there by himself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he was living there by himself.
He got kicked out. He moves in there.
His rent was like $800 or $850 a month, and he couldn't afford that by himself because he was only selling drugs.
Oh, that was his gig.
Yes, which I think was also a big portion of why his mom kicked him out. Because she could see the traffic of people. They had neighbors that were complaining, things of that nature. She wasn't okay with that, especially with 2 younger kids in the house.
Sure.
I was paying half of his rent.
And not living there.
No, and at this point it was like he was abusive and I didn't have a choice and he was upset with me if I wasn't helping him in every single way I could.
Part of the abuse was forcing you to pay or making you feel guilty so that you would pay half the rent.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, how long had you guys been together?
I think we had only been together for, I would say, under 6 months.
Okay.
If not right at 6 months.
Okay. And then, so you're together, he's shown his abusive, angry side. And then he moves into this apartment, you're paying half the rent. And at what point did you move in there?
So that was a big portion of why mom and dad were like, just move. They're like, we're not dumb. We know where your money is going. When you sit here and say you have no money after you just got paid, it's because you're giving him half of your money. If you're going to be paying half rent there, you might as well just go there. So that's why I backtracked a little bit because I completely forgot that portion of it. So go back to when they said just move out. My brain's, I'm going to move out tomorrow. Okay. So I called Tristan immediately and I'm like, hey, I got the okay from my parents to move out. Like, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. Blah, blah, blah.
Were you 17 at that point? You remember?
I don't think so. If I was very freshly 17.
Okay.
And he helped me pack all my stuff. The very next day, I literally told mom and dad, I'm ready to go. Like, Tristan's coming to help me grab all my stuff. And they were like, whoa, we didn't expect that to be so quick. I just wanted out so bad. I ended up moving in with him and things progressively got worse from then on. He played video games very heavily. And so one of the things that he did was he would make me watch him play video games. I wasn't allowed to just do whatever I wanted.
Read a book or listen to music or yeah. Okay.
And also just to map it out for you visually, when I say the dungeon, it literally was a side gate to this poor lady's side yard. It wasn't even to her backyard.
Okay.
a weird set of concrete stairs that like spiraled down to her basement.
Mhm.
But the rest of the basement was completely cut off. We had one room that was our living room, our kitchen, our bedroom. And then our bathroom was like a tiny little area. The shower was a corner shower. It barely fit one person. The closet that we had barely fit one person's clothes. It was tiny,
So it was like a studio apartment. Like with
basically.
your bed in the living room, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. So there was no escape for me. And he would force me to go and sit and watch him play video games, and he would get mad at his video games. And I'd be on my phone, not paying any attention, have no idea that he just died in his video game, which, like, okay, as if that's that big of a deal.
It's frustrating. I played Crash Bandicoot and I fall off the ledges all the time. That's really frustrating.
True.
But not frustrating enough to throw punches at your girlfriend.
Yeah, he would just straight up look at me and hit me. And I'd be like, what? And it wasn't like necessarily directed towards me, but it was like I could see all this anger build up, and he didn't know what to do with it. And I was the only thing that he had to take it out on. So he would just turn to me and punch me in the legs or whatever. And I literally would look at him and be like, what is wrong with you? Did I do something to you? You're really gonna hit me over a video game? And he had this look on his face. I can see it in my head now. I can't really describe it, but it's like crazy eyes and just like the most serious look. It wasn't him. It literally was a switch in his brain.
He probably had some
I know he
mental
has
instability.
bipolar disorder and things of that nature. He was going to anger management as well, all of those things.
So you would see the switch flip.
Yeah.
And then what would happen?
It
Would
was
he
either
get worse?
it would get worse or the guilt thing would happen, and then he like wanted to threaten to hurt himself. But majority of the things that happened were, I feel like he raped me a majority of our relationship. He forced me to have sex with him anywhere from 3 to 4 times a day.
What?
Yes. And then he would also wake me up. So there was a portion where he worked overnights for construction. He would either wake me up right when he was leaving for work, and it literally wasn't even me awake. It was me laying there saying, don't touch me. And he just did whatever he wanted anyways. Or him coming home from work and I was asleep in the same scenario. And then if I at all acted like something was wrong or like I was not interested, then it was a whole nother physical issue of you're not attracted to me, then we're going to get physical. I'm angry with you. So at this point, I think I was under 100 pounds. There's no way. I got so deathly skinny when I was with him. And he was still so huge compared to me. And I was not allowed to take showers by myself.
What?
I was not allowed to take showers by myself. He would get offended if I wanted to take a shower by myself, and things would turn physical then.
What was he
However,
afraid of
I have no idea.
in the shower?
I don't know if he was that insecure that he thought that any free time that I would have had because of how awful he was, I was reaching for something else.
But you're in the shower. You don't even have your phone with you or anything.
Yeah, I was so controlling every aspect.
But I guess an abuser is not rational thinking. And one of their main goals is to try to isolate you from the rest of the world. So I suppose that kind of all goes along with it. And he's obviously that insecure and paranoid. He felt the need to control your showering.
It gets worse.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And not only did he force me to shower with him, but I was not allowed to use the water when I wanted to use the water. I had to stand in the corner freezing until he allowed me to use the water.
Oh my gosh.
And then if I finished my shower first, I was not allowed to get out and use the towel first because we were basically children. So we had minimal towels. We also did not have a washing machine or a dryer. So the things that we had clean were minimal. So majority of the time it was one towel that we were sharing. I was not allowed to get that towel wet. He had to get out of the shower first and then let me get out of the shower because he couldn't stand having a wet towel. And then I don't know, I remember other times too where he would get upset with me for, I think there was one time I got out of the shower first and I was like, screw you. I'm tired of this. You're not going to control that. Why can't I use the towel dry? I'm the woman here.
Or take turns or something.
Yeah, I don't understand why you always have to have the control. And he was so mad at me. I remember it was like one of the first times that he was physical with me when I was naked and like angry physical.
Mm.
And I had like scratches everywhere and like bruises
Oh
everywhere.
my God.
And we had a futon with the metal armrests on the side. And he would throw me onto that and I would grab like the metal things so that he couldn't, because he could pick me up and just do whatever he wanted. And he would pick up what he could and then just throw me into that bar, just continue to bash me into it. And majority of the time, what I remember happening is he would start to get violent and I would want to leave. And I'd be like, please let me leave. I'm just going to take a drive.
Seems like a rational thing to want to do.
He would stand in front of the door.
And
I feel like
and you
that's
only
where-
had the one door,
Mhm.
no windows.
Mm-mm. And that's where things would very highly escalate. And I think that's where things escalated every single time. I couldn't tell you what we fought about every single time because it was always something stupid.
How often were these instances happening? Was this daily? It was.
Yeah, and then it got to a point where he would stand in front of the door and I would stand there and say, please move. And I'd get a little closer and he'd throw me a little harder each time. And then he did get to a point where he was choking me.
Oh my God.
And I remember there was one time, and again, I can't remember what we were fighting about, but I know it started in front of the door. And he pushed me onto the bed like he always did. But this time he got on top of me and he put his hands around my neck and I was seeing stars. And I literally just sat there and said, this is when he's going to kill me. I've stayed here too long and this is the point where he has full control. And I couldn't do anything.
So did he obviously backed off. What do you think made him?
Me losing consciousness.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God, Terrah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's fast forward a little bit because I know he got in trouble for what he was doing, and we don't have to share that story because that's his journey to tell. But at what point did you decide? Obviously, the thoughts of leaving were in your mind every single time, but at what point were you like, I need to get the fuck out of here? Because I remember you making that decision and reaching out to mom and dad to help and stuff like that. So what was there something specifically that happened? Or do you remember at one point just being like, I gotta get out. This is it.
I think the turning point ultimately for me, which I think there were several, but I think the biggest turning point for me was the day that we did the back and forth at the door.
And
Same
he
old, same
choked
old.
you and you pass out, or
No, this was a different day. We did back and forth. He got super violent again, and then he pulled the suicidal thing. This time, he had just acquired a 12-inch blade from a friend that he legally was not supposed to have. He pulled the blade out and touched it to his throat, standing in front of the door. And I could see, and it was definitely pressed into his skin. It wasn't like he was holding it a few inches away. The blade was pressed into his skin. And I think because I loved him at the time, I don't really know how else to explain it. It was just my instincts. My left hand shot out and I grabbed the blade. And he pulled as I grabbed. And immediately, it's when you get a paper cut and you're like, oh, dang it. Like, I just totally got
hurt
paper
right
cut.
away.
Yeah, like right away when something's bad. And I remember panicking, and all of our dungeon had carpet. So my first thought was, I can't bleed on the carpet. So I'm gonna run to the bathroom.
That's her first thought.
So I ran to the bathroom and I turned the sink on, and the water that came out of the sink opened my wound wound up and we could see my bone and like my tendons. I'm very squeamish, and I learned then that he's very squeamish. We're both passing out in the bathroom.
Both of you.
Both of us. He's freaking out because he doesn't know what to do because he just caused this. I'm like, I have to go to the hospital, clearly, which in reality, keep in mind, I was still 17 years old. I should have gone to urgent care, but you
didn't know.
No, I didn't know. So he got me a red towel so that we couldn't tell how much I was bleeding. He drove me to the hospital. I didn't have my medical insurance card. I didn't have any information.
So you were still on moms at that point?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know anything. I had to call mom and be like, hey, I need the insurance information. Well, why are you at the hospital? What happened?
And at this point, I just want to let everybody know our mom was very aware of what was going on. I don't know. I don't remember how she picked up on it early on, but I remember her being very in tune with what was going on. And I remember towards the end of that. So she had known what was going on. So this call from Terrah probably wasn't super shocking, but also terrifying because your kid's in the hospital with a cut. So she asks you what happened.
I said that I was cutting fruit for breakfast and then I slipped with a knife and then I accidentally cut myself. She ended up showing up to the hospital and Tristan left to go to a weed convention in Denver that he had planned, that he had tickets for. When mom showed up, I think that was ultimately the indication that he was somehow involved because the story was sus. And he was gone. And she's like, how are you here in the hospital getting stitches? And he just drops you off and leaves. That makes zero sense. So I ended up.
And side note, I do remember mom telling me about that story. And I do remember her calling bullshit immediately on your story.
Yeah.
But she didn't pry for more.
She took me to dinner. I want to say it was a few days or a week later. I still had my splint like on my finger and everything. And she actually gave me domestic violence pamphlets. And she said,
pamphlets.
Yeah, like
good
brochures.
job, Mom.
She said, I think I know what's going on. You can choose to tell me about it or not. But I'm telling you now that like my motherly instincts are saying that this is what's going on and I'm concerned. She said, I'm going to give you another opportunity to tell me what happened with your finger and be honest. And I still was protecting him at that time.
Do you know why you were protecting him or why you felt the need to protect him?
Because I knew it was wrong.
Yeah, but then why protect him? Obviously, you probably still loved him to some degree, right? Even though he was treating you this way, there was still feelings there. So
I think I thought that I could fix him. And I know that sounds so cliche of, oh, I can fix him. Everything will be great. And I don't think that I went into it thinking that. But I think genuinely I thought he needs this love and like this compassion that he's never seen from his family. Ultimately, I think he's missing things that no one can replace. And I didn't know that until obviously years later.
You were so young too. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I defended him. And then I remember things continued to be bad after that. And I got out one day when we played the door game. I got out.
So back up a little bit. So that instance where you went to the hospital, that was your first, I gotta get out.
I actually worked at a restaurant in Castle Rock at the time. And one of the ladies that I worked with was older. She was in her 40s and I went to school with her daughter. And I said to her, can I talk to you about something? And it was the only and the first and only time that I had actually reached out to someone to be like, hey, this is going on and I don't know how to talk about it. And I just said, like, he's really physical with me sometimes. I didn't really go into detail. And she basically just told me that I need to get out of that and that if that was her daughter, that's what she would say. I personally wish maybe she would have said something to someone else, not to put that on her at all, because it's not her responsibility. But I think that was the first time that I was really trying to seek help without actually asking for it. And mom and I showed up to the same restaurant for dinner. A few days later, my finger was cut open and she was there, and I introduced her to mom. And she never said anything about the things that I had told her, which again, I don't blame her for that because it's not really her place.
It's a tough position to be in.
But I think that for me, almost it would have helped me a lot to have someone say something for me because I didn't know how to.
So, what was your process then of trying to figure out how to get out? Because I remember you contacting mom and dad and looking for help, but I think I may have not been here. So, talk about that process a little bit, because anybody who might be listening that's in this situation, maybe you could give them just talk about your story about how you got out, because some people don't. So,
well,
and it's 17 years old also.
Yeah.
To be dealing with this kind of stuff. Okay. I can keep going. Go ahead. Tell me how you got out, and then we'll go back to the feeling.
To start, there was one day that I got out of the house when we played the back and forth game at the door. And
what does that mean? Oh, when you guys, he was blocking the way, you wanted to leave, he said no. Okay.
And usually it turned always really bad, but for some reason, this one day I was able to get out.
Oh.
And
was it the only time ever you were able to get out?
Yeah. I don't know why. I think he happened to get away from the door for just a few seconds longer than
one or something was looking out for you.
Oh yeah, 1000%.
Okay, so you were able to get out.
And I drove not far from the house and I called his stepdad. I actually think I tried to call his mom first, but she didn't answer. She was at work. And I told them for the first time everything that was going on. And he watched his mom get dragged by her hair by other men. He explained awful things that he witnessed with his mom. To know that his mom had been through the physical abuse that he was putting me through, that I was enduring every day, I felt safe to go to them. I ended up moving back in with mom for a short period of time. And
but so so when you called his stepdad, did they come get him, or what happened there?
No, I don't really know exactly what happened on their end fully, if I'm being honest with you. I know a few days went by and they all wanted to have a conversation with Tristan and I. So we all met, and his mom literally looked him in the face and said, if I ever find out again that you put your hands on her, I'm gonna personally show up here myself and beat the shit out of you. And I think that was the first time also where I was like, oh, like other people can actually acknowledge like something's wrong here. Because I think I had just made excuses for someone that it was my new normal. And to see his mom say, I'm going to beat you up if you put your hands on her again, was also a wake-up call for me. But it was very apparent after that they didn't really have my back because things continued. I moved back in shortly after that. And I think at that point, it was just I was exhausted. I didn't want to do it anymore.
So you didn't move out at that point?
No, not fully. I had moved in with mom for I think a week, and then he roped me back in.
Okay.
Guilt tripped me into staying with him for a little bit longer if things continued to be bad. And I was just so over it at that point. We had so many conversations of like why this wasn't okay.
And it was continuing.
Yeah, and getting worse. And Tegan actually reached out to me first and said, I just want you to know I have a friend who has a room available in Castle Rock. There's 2 guys that are living there that are willing to protect you. We can keep your location secretive. If you want to take them up on this, let me know. If not, it's fine. But I'm trying to give you an out. And I was like, okay, I need to figure everything out. I ended up talking to her friend. We worked things out. Mom went with me to the house to meet the 2 male roommates to make sure like that was okay and everything there was appropriate. One of them was ex-military, which was actually really great, and he had a giant pit bull.
Nice.
So mom explained to him she is an abusive boyfriend, and if he shows up here, you need to protect her because no one else can. We're not here. And he was like 1000%, nothing's gonna happen to her. So I had gotten the process of that moving, but one of the hardest things in my whole journey with Tristan was pretending for probably 2 or 3 weeks until I could move into the place that I was moving into. So that included having sex with him and literally laying there and crying the entire time. That included having, which also the dungeon lease was coming to an end. So we were in the process of needing to find an apartment. But of course, that was all my responsibility. So he would ask me every day, what's going on with that? Did you find an apartment? Little does he know I found something for myself. And I'm going to bullshit him until I can Dear John him.
Yeah.
So I did. It was awful. I had a couple instances where friends were over and they knew that I was leaving. And everyone did a really good job of protecting me. They
The
all
people
started
who-
off as his friends. And then they saw what was going on. And they understood why I was needing to leave.
Sure.
They
These are
were
good
present.
people.
Yeah. They were present for times where he got violent with me over apartments. And that was like really the first times other people got to see. And then, yeah, finally the time came that I was able to move. And I had Dad and Lynette come to the dungeon, and I already had packed all my stuff up. He was at anger management. We put all my stuff in Dad's truck and in my car. And when we were leaving the house, I called Tristan's mom. I also wrote him a letter and I just let him know I've tried and I love you and I have loved you through this, but I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And please don't contact me. Please don't contact my family. Don't show up to my job. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And I called his mom. I said, I just want to let you know that Tristan's going to be an absolute mess when he gets home because I'm gone. I moved. I can't do it anymore. And she said, oh gosh, what did she say? She said something really mean to me. She said something like, you're a piece of shit.
What?
And I said, okay, I'm gonna go. And I hung up the phone and I was just like hysterical. And then I got a call back from her like 2 minutes later. And I was like, hi. She's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Apple doesn't fall far from the freaking tree. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you. I just love Tristan so much and he deserves so much and you deserve everything. And I can't believe my son has continued to put his hands on you. And I thought that I made it very clear he wasn't able to do that anymore. Oh, really? Because you control him? So I just was like, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you, but I'm done. I just wanted to give you the respect of telling you what was going on because you're going to have to deal with him now. Good luck.
Yeah.
We ended up actually being friends with benefits for months after that. We would hang out every day, and all of the time he wanted to have sex with me. It was ridiculous. I was not at all attracted to him. He would sit there and cry and tell me all the things he wanted to do differently. And I'm like, do you not understand that you sitting here and crying and playing the victim is not attractive to me and it's not fixing anything? And I think I was so over it. At the same time, I was so lonely. And it was the first time I was ever on my own.
So at what point did you finally fully cut him off?
So-
Do you want to talk about this timeline?
Oh, no, it's
Okay.
fine. The timeline's very open. It's very out there. It's not a secret to anyone. Definitely not something I'm the most proud of. But I had my hot water shut off at the house I was living at. Things went south with the roommates I was living with and the landlord that I had. So nothing really involving me. I'm also still 17. Actually, at this point, I think I had just turned 18. But I had never rented like a place by myself, nothing like that. The only experience I had was this awful, crappy place with Tristan that was not legit at all. We didn't even pay utilities. We just paid rent.
So utilities get shut off.
Utilities got shut off because none of it was in my name. The other roommates left. I knew nothing about it. I woke up one morning with no hot water, heat, or lights. It was the middle of winter. My cat was super sick. I was barely affording stomach ulcer medication for myself, stress related due to the abuse I had endured. I cut off the medication for myself to pay for the medication for Leo. Because
Her cat.
Yeah, Leo was literally not okay. He had gotten feline herpes from Missy and he was still a kitten, so it was really bad. I was showering at Tristan's house.
Missy's the other cat.
Yes.
Okay.
I was showering at Tristan's house because I had no hot water. So I think that told me, and I took advantage of him. I will straight up admit that now. It's not okay. Wasn't okay then, is not okay today. But I did what I had to do to shower.
Sure.
So I went over to his house after work, took a shower. I had a shower caddy because obviously I was sharing a bathroom with the other two roommates I had. So I kept all my stuff separate and just brought it to my room. I left my shower caddy at Tristan's. I had plans to hang out with Dylan, who is my current fiance. And Tristan was all up in my grill the whole time I was getting ready at his place. Let's go out tonight. Let's go get ice cream, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know. I have plans. I'll let you know. Dylan comes over to my house for the first time. Also, just to backtrack a smidge, my best friend at the time was also previously in an abusive relationship, and I had taken her in to where I was living to get her out of that. And that was very new. She had just moved in with me a week, if not less, prior to Dylan and I first hanging out. So Dylan and I are hanging out, and there is a knock on my front door. I think that it's Taryn, my friend, who had just moved in because she didn't have a key yet. It was so new. Dylan, being the respectful man that he is, followed me upstairs because my living quarters was the basement. So he followed me upstairs to the front door just to be respectful of my home. It was Tristan. And when I tell you that I actually thought that Dylan was going to die, I actually thought that situation was going to be fatal. He opened the door and he had my shower caddy, which that just looks so bad.
Yeah.
And he's, I've been calling and texting you all night. And I was like, you need to go now. He knows Dylan from the skate park.
Okay.
They're not friends. They're
Just
like
know of each other.
acquaintances. Pushes his way through the house, bawling hysterically, gets all up in Dylan's face. Bro, you're my best friend. You're my best friend. How could you do this to me? That's everything to me. She is everything to me. And Dylan's just, bro, we're friends. Nothing's going on. It's literally the first time we've ever hung out. Calm down. She's my friend. Take a breath. They hugged. Tristan cry hugged him.
Oh, wow.
And Dylan was like looking at me like, it's fine. We get him out of the house and he is screaming bloody murder in my front lawn on the phone with someone. She's here with someone else. She's cheating on me.
Oh, man.
So I call his mom. He's in deep with legal trouble. And I know this. So I don't want to call the cops, which I shouldn't have been protecting him anymore, but I was. I said, you need to get him off of my property right now, or the cops will. And she said, I should call the cops on you. And I hung up immediately. Again, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Gosh.
Hang up the phone, call 911. The police show up. Dylan and I, a reminder, this is the first time I have ever hung out with him, have to reenact in front of the cop everything that happened with Tristan. We finally get back downstairs to finish off the evening, and I'm mortified. I'm like, this kid's never gonna talk to me ever again. This is done. I'm done for. And he was so kind. I just kept telling him how sorry I was and how embarrassed I was. And he was like, he should be embarrassed. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm so sorry that you've had to deal with that. The cops went over to Tristan's house, told him that if he continued to have contact with me or anything, that there was a paper trail at this point. I want no contact with him. That was the last time that I spoke to Tristan in that sense. Dylan and I progressively grew in our relationship. We ended up starting to date officially. And then Tristan ended up on a phone call with my ex-best friend. who I was with day in and day out, same girl that I took in from her abusive relationship. We were splitting all of our bills, making things work between the two of us. And he called her one day when I was with her, and she didn't tell him that I was on the other line listening through speaker or whatever. And he basically cried to her over the phone and said that he just was waiting for me to come back. That genuinely was his mentality, was that there was no such thing, there was no world that existed where I left him. That was how sick he was in the head, that he could treat me, he could touch me, do whatever he wanted hurtful to me, and that I would still be there at the end of the day. But ultimately, I think I taught him that he could expect those things from me, right? So I told Taryn, I said, does he know I'm dating someone else now officially? So she said on the phone, you know that she's with Dylan now, right? The whole snap. I wasn't even seeing his face. I could hear it over the phone. And he was saying that he was going to show up to Dylan's family's house and murder them.
Oh my God.
Like it literally went to that extent. And I know he knows where Dylan's family's house was because we went to parties there together. So it wasn't an unrealistic threat. I grabbed the phone and I'm like, we're not doing this. You're not going to threaten them. If you continue to say that, I will call the police right now. I will, because that's not okay. He was hysterical, just telling me how he thought I was going to come back and all these things. And I ended up having to get off the phone with him. It wouldn't stop. I just felt like we were going in cycles again. This time I was on the phone though, and I could leave whenever I wanted.
Yeah. So now, obviously, you're engaged to Dylan. That went well.
Thank God.
Now you're 24 years old. You look back on this stuff obviously very differently than you felt in the moment. What does that feel like?
It feels like I let myself down. I feel like one thing that I say nowadays, which it feels like a lot of the times it's easy to feel like people don't have your back. But how can you expect to feel like other people have your back when you don't have your back? And I didn't have my back. I didn't have my back in middle school. I didn't have my back in high school.
At the same time, though, you were so young. Like, we learn a lot of that stuff through life experiences and unfortunately stuff like that is how you end up becoming who you are and learning, and maturity and brain development and all of that plays a huge role. I hope you don't blame yourself for that too much.
No, honestly, it's really hard for me to dissect. I think that at this point, the only explanation that I have is that I was willing to put up at that time with anything to not feel alone.
Why do you think that was?
I think that I felt super alone through my childhood. And then when I was a teenager, I was crappy. And so I didn't have anyone to have my back then because of the decisions that I made. So I ultimately chose loneliness at that point. And then again with the stupid boys, which I know it's stupid because I was a child, but I think I was seeking attention from boys because I wasn't getting it elsewhere. And then Tristan was the only person that gave me the attention that I ultimately wanted. And so it was confusing to me that he could say that he loved me so much.
Yeah.
And that he wanted me to not feel alone the way that he knew I had been feeling, but could hurt me in other ways that I couldn't imagine anyone else hurting me in, if that makes sense. So it was like a toss up. Like I was so young that I was like, if I don't have to feel alone, then I can put up with these things that he's putting me through. And I can fix him. And then once he's fixed, then everything will be perfect and he won't hurt me anymore. But I think just over time, I started to realize that it was never going to change.
Mhm.
And I ultimately felt more alone when I was with him than when I wasn't with him.
Mm.
Because you can't talk to anyone about that. I protected him from everyone.
And that's how they work, right? That's how abusers work, is they try to isolate you as much as possible so that you can't tell on them.
Mhm.
And they do have full control over you because anyone else is a threat.
Mhm.
So it sounds like you're still so young. You still have so much life to live. I don't know. You're working through it
Mhm.
quite a bit. Do you feel like you've learned a lot in the last few years about yourself and looking back on all that stuff?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the issues that I personally have is it's easier for me to push it away.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure there's plenty of details that I just couldn't even possibly remember right now.
At some point, you have to just like acknowledge the thing as a
Mhm.
thing, right? Like, you don't need to go rehash all of the little tiny details of every single abuse situation or whatever. Like, at some point, you just need to understand it,
Mhm.
heal from it. And maybe that's one of those things. I haven't been in your shoes, but maybe that's one of those things you don't fully heal from.
Mhm.
Maybe it gets easier to deal with as time goes on, and you have maybe less triggers as time goes on, but
Mhm.
maybe it's still something that never fully leaves you.
Yeah, I think it's something that I haven't chosen to fully work through.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I don't necessarily think it's a choice to not work through it, but I only started therapy a year ago and have not been super consistent with it.
Mhm.
And I felt like there was so much to unpack with a new therapist
Mhm.
that that's not where we started.
Mm-hmm. It's so hard. I feel like you have to start from the very beginning of the day you were born and work through all the things. It's so hard with a new therapist for sure.
So she's aware of those
Mhm.
things, but I think that's definitely something I need to continue to unpack with a therapist.
Mhm.
I have pretty much debilitating anxiety and depression and all of those things I don't feel like I felt until I went through what I went through with Tristan.
Mhm.
I look back at pictures from photo albums that we got of me when I was little, and I'm like, where the hell did that little girl go?
Mm.
And it's honestly heartbreaking. I think about it all the time, like even with my job, where did your confidence go?
Mhm.
But ultimately, my confidence and all of that kind of left me when I was a child going
I
through
think
all
it
of that.
does for a lot of us. I just recently started a new book that's called The Mastery of Love.
Mhm.
I don't really know. I'm only like very early stages of it, but it talks about how we're all born pretty innocent and not jaded. And it says that for most people around age 4 and 5 is when real life starts to kick in. And you're still a kid and stuff, and you're still experiencing kid-like things, but that's roughly for most people when the challenges start kicking in and that affect us the rest of our lives.
Interesting.
I wonder if some of that has to do with like when our memory kicks in too.
Yeah,
Because like I don't think most people remember much before they're like 5 years old. So, but I don't know. We're all born these innocent souls,
Mhm.
and then we get into this world that throws all the curveballs at us. And sometimes it starts at 5, sometimes it starts at 13, sometimes it starts at 25.
Mhm.
But that's my motivation in starting this podcast, is that like everyone has something.
Mhm.
Some are worse than others, but everyone has something. So I guess to wrap this up, advice or parting words would you have for somebody out there that may be in that situation?
I would say there's a voice inside of you, whether or not you choose to listen to it. There is your intuition that tells you this is wrong. I deserve better. And even if maybe you don't believe those things, listen to it. And when you start to feel like you deserve better, even like I said, if you don't believe that, because I think a lot of misconceptions that we have of ourselves is I won't find better. Because that's also another thing that I really struggled with. I remember crying to my mom and saying, what happens if I break up with him and some other girl starts dating him and she fixes all the things I wanted to fix? That is not true. That will not happen. If you cannot fix him, no one else can. He needs to fix himself. And enabling the behavior does not help them. It hurts them. You have to separate yourself. You have to choose yourself. And you choosing yourself is ultimately helping them as well. As heavy as that is to hear, it's true. And I promise you, the second you take a step away and you choose yourself and you stop enabling the behavior that you've allowed yourself to be a victim to for however long, you will be validated in the fact that choosing yourself was the best decision you could have possibly made in your life.
I love that.
Thank you.
So good. That was a lot. This was a heavy episode, but thank you for sharing all that, for being open, for being vulnerable. I do fully respect that this is a very difficult thing that I am asking of people, but my hope is that your story will help someone else find hope, maybe feel less alone. Yeah. So thank you for being open to sharing all of that, because that's a lot, and so much at such a young age.
Yeah, of
And I'm
course.
sorry that you went through all that.
It's okay. Thank you.
And I love you.
I love you too.
I plan on having the siblings back at some point. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you are somebody that's struggling with an abusive relationship, I hope you find hope in it and don't feel so alone. And yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.